I didn't mean to interfere with the Mafia, but when I heard Vinpen, Chayatutwen, whispered in the rain, I knew silence could kill him. The rain came down in sheets, turning the neon signs along Henderson Street into bleeding watercolors across the black pavement. My daughter Layla's small hand was warm in mine, her backpack bumping against my hip as we navigated the crowded sidewalk outside Mama Chen's kitchen. The smell of hot oil and garlic followed us from the restaurant's exhaust vents, mixing with the wet asphalt scent that always reminded me of long shifts and longer nights. "Mom, my shoes are getting soaked," Lila complained, her voice muffled by the hood of her red raincoat. "I know, baby. We're almost at the car. Almost at the car. Almost home. Almost safe." I was calculating whether we had enough for gas and groceries when I heard them. Two men stood beside a black SUV parked at an angle near the curb, their voices low and urgent. Korean. I'd worked with enough Korean exchange students at the hospital to recognize the rhythm, even if I only caught fragments of meaning. They were both young, dressed in expensive black jackets that didn't quite hide the bulk at their shoulders. I should have kept walking, but then one of them said it, clear as a gunshot in my memory even through the rain. "Poktan, chae naoseo." Bomb. Put it in the car. My body went cold. The words looped in my head, sharpening into certainty. I'd learned just enough Korean working night shifts. Medical terms, yes, but also the basics when patients' families whispered in waiting rooms. Bomb. Car. Put it in. My eyes snapped to where they were looking. Across the street, a silver sedan gleamed under the amber streetlight. Expensive, sleek, guarded by three men in tailored suits who stood too still, too alert. One of them had his hand on the driver's door, keys glinting. And in the center of that protective circle stood a man I recognized from news clippings, whispered conversations, the kind of warnings people gave without naming names. Elias Vasaro, tall, controlled, a face carved from expensive marble, sharp jawline, dark eyes that seemed to measure everything and give away nothing. His suit probably cost more than 3 months of my rent. He moved like water, fluid, and inevitable. And even from across the rain-slicked street, I could feel the gravity he exerted. People stepped aside without realizing why. The city's quiet storm. The man restaurant owners paid not to notice them. The name that made even cops look the other way. I should have kept walking. Instead, I thought of the families I'd seen in the ER. The ones who came in after accidents that were never accidents. I thought of the woman last month whose son had been in the wrong place. I thought of Layla's hand in mine, and how easily a little girl could become collateral damage in someone else's war. One of the guards reached for his keys. "Wait here," I told Lila, pressing her behind a parked truck, my hands shaking as I shoved my purse at her. "Don't move. I mean it." "Mom." I was already running. "Wait." My voice cracked through the rain. Too loud, too desperate. "Don't open that door." Everything stopped. 5 men turned toward me in perfect, predatory unison. Water streamed down my face. My sneakers squeaked on wet concrete. My uniform polo clung to my skin, the hospital logo probably visible even in the downpour. I looked exactly like what I was. A tired, scared, soaking wet nobody who'd just screamed at the most dangerous man in the city. But it was Elias Vasaro who held my gaze, not with anger, not with confusion, with curiosity. He tilted his head slightly, rain sliding off the sharp plane of his cheekbone, and those dark eyes, storm cloud gray in the neon light, pinned me in place like a specimen under glass. His expression didn't change. No frown, no smile, just an intense, unnerving focus that made my breath catch. One of his guards stepped forward, hand moving toward his jacket. "She's just..." The guard started. "Stop." Elias's voice was quiet, controlled, the kind of voice that didn't need volume to command. He raised one hand, and the guard froze mid-step. Elias looked at me. Really looked. Not through me, not past me, but at me in a way that felt like being read in a language I didn't speak. "Say it again," he said, still quiet, still terrifyingly calm. My throat was dry. "Don't. Get in. The car." "Why not?" I wanted to run. Wanted to grab Lila and disappear into the rain and pretend I'd never heard those 2 men speaking in Korean. But his eyes wouldn't let me lie. I heard them. I jerked my chin toward the black SUV. The 2 men were trying to melt into the shadows now, but it was too late. They said bomb. They said they put it in the car. For 3 seconds, no one moved. Then Elias smiled. It wasn't warm. It wasn't reassuring. It was the smile of a man who'd just confirmed a suspicion, and it chilled me more than the rain ever could. "Marco," he said, still watching me. "Check the car." One of the guards, broad-shouldered, moving with military precision, approached the silver sedan. He crouched near the undercarriage, pulled out a small flashlight, and went still. "Boss." Marco's voice was tight. "She's right. It's wired." The world tilted. I'd been right. I'd actually been right, and that meant, boom. The explosion was a wall of sound and heat that knocked me backward. I hit the wet pavement hard, palms scraping, vision whiting out. Glass rained down in 1,000 glittering pieces. Car alarms shrieked. Somewhere close, Lila was screaming my name. I rolled onto my hands and knees, ears ringing, and looked up. The silver sedan was a burning skeleton. Flames licked up into the rain, hissing and spitting. Smoke billowed across the street in thick, acrid clouds. And through it all, Elias Vasaro stood exactly where he'd been before, untouched, unshaken, his gray eyes still locked on me, not on the wreckage, not on his men scrambling to secure the perimeter, not on the chaos exploding around him, on me. "Lila." I tried to stand, but someone's hand closed around my upper arm, hauling me upright. Another guard. He wasn't rough, but he wasn't gentle either. "My daughter." "She's fine." Marco appeared on my other side, rain streaming down his buzz-cut head. Truck shielded her. She's scared but not hurt. I could see her now. Lila pressed against the truck's wheel well, my purse clutched to her chest, her eyes huge and terrified in the red glow of the flames. "Let me go to her." "Not yet." Marco's grip didn't loosen. "Boss wants to talk to you first." Elias approached through the smoke like something out of a nightmare. No hurry, no fear, just that same fluid, inevitable movement. He stopped 2 feet away, close enough that I could see the rain beating on his expensive suit, the faint scar along his left temple, the absolute absence of shock in his expression. "Who sent you?" His voice was still quiet, still controlled. But underneath it now, I heard the steel. "What, no one? Who told you to be here tonight?" To say those exact words? "No one, I heard them talking, I swear." In Korean. Not a question, a test. "Yes. I work at Memorial Hospital, night shift. I've picked up enough too." My voice cracked. "I'm telling you the truth. I don't know who planted that bomb. I don't know anything except what I heard." He studied me for a long, terrible moment. Behind him, sirens wailed in the distance, getting closer. His men shifted, forming a tighter circle, blocking sight lines from the growing crowd of onlookers. "Marco," Elias said, still watching me. "Take her and the child. Back entrance. We'll continue this conversation somewhere private." Ice flooded my veins. No, you can't. I have to get my daughter home. You just saved my life." His head tilted again, that same unsettling focus. "That means either you're extraordinarily brave, or you're part of something much larger. Either way, miss." "Jackson, Renee Jackson." My voice shook. "And I'm not part of anything. I just didn't want to watch someone die." Something flickered in his expression. Not warmth, exactly, but something that made me think, just for a second, that he believed me. "Then you have nothing to fear from a few questions," he said. "Your daughter stays with you. You'll both be perfectly safe." It wasn't a request. As Marco guided me toward a dark SUV idling at the curb, I caught Lila's terrified face. I tried to smile, tried to look calm, tried to pretend that we weren't being taken by the Mafia because I'd made the stupidest, bravest decision of my life. Just before they ushered me into the vehicle, I looked back one last time. Elias Vasaro stood in the rain and the firelight, watching me go, his gray eyes reflecting the flames. And I knew, with absolute, bone-deep certainty, that shouting across that street had changed everything. The private room at the back of Luciano's smelled like leather and old cigars. Elias preferred it that way. Familiar, controlled, insulated from the chaos still unfolding 3 blocks away. Through the tinted windows, he could see the red and blue pulse of emergency vehicles painting the rain-soaked street. But the sirens were muted here, reduced to a distant hum beneath the building's soundproofing. Renee Jackson sat across from him, her daughter tucked against her side like a shield. The girl, Lila, he'd heard her called, and had finally stopped crying, but her eyes were still red-rimmed and huge, tracking every movement in the room with the hypervigilance of prey. The mother was different. Renee's hands trembled where they gripped her daughter's shoulders, but her jaw was set, her gaze direct. Defiant, even. Water still dripped from her hair onto the expensive carpet, and her hospital polo clung to her frame in a way that emphasized exactly how small she was, how ordinary, and yet she'd run toward a bomb. "We have a problem," Marco said, closing the door behind him with a soft click. His voice was low, controlled, but Elias heard the edge beneath it. Marco had been with him for 8 years, long enough to recognize when his head of security wanted blood. "Explain." Elias didn't look away from Renee. She flinched slightly at the word but held his gaze. She knew exactly where to look, exactly what to say. Marco moved to stand between Elias and the women, his bulk deliberately imposing. "The Koreans have been probing our routes for weeks. Haedong Group's been quiet but not gone. This." He gestured toward Renee. "This is too convenient." "I didn't," Renee started, but Marco cut her off. "You speak Korean. You show up at the exact moment, the exact location. You scream a warning 15 seconds before my guy would have found it anyway." Marco's hand rested on his belt, close to the weapon Elias knew was holstered there. "Boss, let me handle this." Quietly. The girl never saw our faces clearly in the rain. Elias felt something cold slide through his chest. Not anger. He'd learned long ago that anger made you sloppy. But something darker, more fundamental. His sister's face flashed behind his eyes. Elena, 12 years old, her hand waving from the back window of their father's sedan. The fireball that had consumed her 3 seconds later. No innocence. The rule he'd built his empire on. The line he'd drawn in blood and kept sacred even when it cost him territory. Respect. Leverage. "Bring the interpreter," Elias said quietly. Marco's jaw tightened. "Boss. Now." The silence that followed was sharp enough to cut. Renee's arms tightened around her daughter, and Elias saw the girl bury her face against her mother's shoulder. Protective instinct, raw and unthinking. The same instinct that had sent Renee running into the street. Marco left without another word. Elias leaned back in his chair, fingers finding the platinum cufflinks at his wrists, a tell he'd never quite managed to eliminate. "Tell me again what you heard." "Exactly." Renee's throat bobbed as she swallowed. "Poktan, chayanosa." Her pronunciation was clumsy, American flat, but clear enough. "Bomb. Put it in the car. That's all I caught before I..." She broke off, shaking her head. "I work night shifts at Memorial Hospital. We get Korean patients. I've picked up some medical terms, some basics. Enough to know when someone's talking about something that might kill people." "Convenient," Elias said, echoing Marco's word deliberately. He watched her reaction. Her eyes flashed. "You think I wanted this? You think I wanted to get involved with?" She glanced at Lila, swallowed the rest of the sentence. "I just didn't want to watch someone die. That's it. That's the whole story." The door opened. Marco returned with a thin man in wire-rimmed glasses. David Kim, the interpreter Elias kept on retainer for exactly these situations. David's expression was carefully neutral, but his eyes widened slightly when he saw the woman and child. "David," Elias said, "this woman claims she overheard 2 Korean speakers near the explosion site. I need you to confirm her story." What followed was 15 minutes of careful, methodical questioning. David asked Renee to repeat what she'd heard, then asked her to describe the speakers, their positions, their body language. He asked about inflection, about context, about why she'd interpreted the words the way she had. Through it all, Elias watched Renee's hands. They were work rough, nails trimmed short and practical, no jewelry except a thin silver band on her right hand. Not a wedding ring, he noted. Her fingers trembled, but they never stopped moving, stroking her daughter's hair, adjusting the girl's hood, maintaining that constant physical contact that spoke of bone-deep protectiveness. Finally, David turned to him. "Her story checks out. The phrasing is exactly what someone would say if they were confirming a device placement. And her pronunciation," he shook his head. "It's terrible, honestly. No one trying to fabricate a story would mangle the vowels that badly." She heard it, didn't fully understand it, but knew enough to recognize the danger. The cold thing in Elias's chest eased slightly. Marco made a disgusted sound. "So we just let her walk? She's still a witness, still a liability." "She saved my life," Elias said quietly. "Or she was part of an elaborate..." "Look at her." Elias's voice sharpened, just enough. Marco went still. "Look at the child. Look at her hands. This isn't a professional." This is a woman who works 2 jobs and happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. He paused. Or the right place. Renee's expression was unreadable, but he saw her shoulders drop slightly. Relief, maybe. Or exhaustion. The sound of police radios crackled from somewhere outside. Marco checked his phone, frowned. Captain Reeves is asking questions. Wants to know if we need anything. Tell him we're fine. The explosion was a gas leak. Tragic accident. We'll be filing a report with the city. Elias stood, smoothing his jacket. The motion drew Renee's gaze, and he saw her calculating, trying to understand the casual way he dismissed attempted murder. I'll have Marco take you home, Elias said. For your safety. We can get home ourselves. Renee stood too, pulling Layla up with her. The girl swayed slightly, exhausted. We don't need. You do. Elias kept his voice level, reasonable. The men who planted that bomb saw you scream. They know you warned me, which means they know you're a problem. He watched the fear bloom in her eyes. Not for herself, he realized, but for the child. That same raw protectiveness that had sent her running in the rain. One escort home, she said finally, voice tight. Then we're done. You go back to your world. I go back to mine. Elias didn't correct her. Didn't tell her that her world and his had collided the moment she opened her mouth, and that collision had gravity. Instead, he nodded to Marco, who led them out through the back exit. Alone in the room, Elias returned to the window. The flames had been extinguished, leaving only the smoking skeleton of his sedan, and a scatter of broken glass catching the streetlights. His phone buzzed. A message from Marco, tail in place. 3-man rotation. She won't see them. Elias deleted the message and pulled up another screen. Security feeds from the surrounding blocks. He rewound to the moment before the explosion, watching Renee's small figure sprint across the wet street. Arms outstretched, mouth open in a shout he couldn't hear through the silent footage. She'd saved him. No one saved him. People feared him, obeyed him, used him. But saved him? That required something he'd thought extinct in his world. Genuine courage without calculation. His phone buzzed again. Unknown number. A single image loaded. A grainy still from a traffic camera. Renee, caught mid-shout, rain streaming down her face, eyes wide with desperate conviction. Below it, a text in Korean. She shouted before it blew. Use her. Elias stared at the message for 3 long seconds. Then he forwarded it to Marco with 2 words. Double the watch. He deleted the original, but the image stayed burned in his mind. That split second of pure, reckless humanity that had rewritten his evening, and he suspected, far more than that. The apartment building's hallway smelled like old carpet and someone's burnt dinner. Renee fumbled with her keys, hyper-aware of the black sedan idling at the curb 3 floors below, its engine a low purr that hadn't stopped since Marco dropped them off 20 minutes ago. Protection, he'd called it. It felt like surveillance. Layla was already asleep, curled on the couch under Renee's work jacket, her red raincoat still damp and draped over the radiator. The apartment was too small. 1 bedroom, a kitchenette that barely fit a 2-burner stove, thin walls that transmitted every argument and footstep from the neighbors. But it was theirs. Safe, anonymous. Except it wasn't anymore. Renee made chamomile tea with shaking hands, the mug chipped at the rim, steam rising into the dim light of the single overhead bulb. Through the window, she could see the sedan's silhouette, unmoving. A second shadow, another car, had appeared at the opposite end of the block. Her phone was cracked across the screen from when she dropped it last month, but it still worked. She opened the browser, typed with cramped fingers, Korean words for bomb explosion car. The translation sites loaded slowly. Poktan, bomb, cha, car, naasa, put in. She'd heard it right. The certainty should have been comforting. Instead, it made her stomach clench. Because if she'd heard it right, if she'd saved Elias Vasaro's life, then whoever planted that bomb knew her face now, knew she'd interfered, knew where to find her. A sound in the stairwell. Footsteps, uneven and too slow. Renee's pulse spiked. She set down the tea, moved to the door, pressed her ear against the wood. The footsteps stopped, just outside. She thought of another night, 6 years ago. Lila strapped in her car seat, headlights in the rearview mirror, too close, too fast. The impact that sent them spinning into the guardrail. The driver who never stopped, never looked back. She'd learned then, you don't ignore danger and hope it passes. You face it, or it devours you. The doorknob rattled. Renee grabbed the baseball bat she kept by the coat rack, Lila's from last summer's failed softball league, and raised it with both hands. "I've called the police," she lied, voice steadier than she felt. "They're on their way." A thud, a grunt, scuffling sounds, muffled and violent, then silence. Renee's hands ached from gripping the bat. She counted to 30 before the knock came. 3 sharp raps, controlled and deliberate. "Miss Jackson," Marco's voice, calm as if he'd just arrived for coffee. "It's clear, but you need to open the door." She did, bat still raised. Marco stood in the hallway, suit jacket slightly rumpled, flanked by another man in black. Between them, a third figure slumped against the wall. Young, maybe 25, nose bleeding, hands zip-tied behind his back. A knife lay on the floor, 3 feet from his boots. "He's not ours," Marco said simply. Renee's grip on the bat loosened. "Who?" "Someone who shouldn't have gotten this close." Marco's expression was unreadable. "We're moving you." "Now." "No." The word came out too fast, too sharp. Lila stirred on the couch, mumbling in her sleep. "No, we're not going anywhere. This is our home. This is a target." A new voice, colder, quieter. Elias Vasaro stepped over the zip-tied man like he was a piece of furniture, his gaze sweeping the cramped apartment in one efficient pass. He looked almost surreal here, too polished, too composed, his tailored suit absorbing the dim light like he'd stepped out of a different dimension. His fingers found his cufflinks, adjusted them with a precision that felt compulsive. The motion lasted half a second, but Renee caught it. A crack in the control. "You saved me," Elias said, stopping 3 feet from her threshold. He didn't enter uninvited. The courtesy felt absurd given the circumstances, but she noticed it anyway. "Now you're a target. The men who planted that bomb know you interfered. They sent him." A glance at the bleeding prowler. "They'll send more. They'll send more." "So what?" Renee's voice cracked. "You lock us up somewhere? Keep us prisoner for doing the right thing? I keep you alive." His tone didn't rise, but something beneath it sharpened. "There's a difference. We're not leaving." Renee moved to stand between him and the couch, between this dangerous stranger and her sleeping daughter. "This is all we have. I'm not letting you. One night." The shift in his voice stopped her. Softer. Not quite pleading, but close enough to surprise them both. "One night in a safe house," Elias continued, his gray eyes holding hers with uncomfortable intensity. "Let me secure your building, trace the leak, confirm the threat level. If it's contained, you come back tomorrow. If it's not..." He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. Renee looked at Lila. Small, vulnerable, dreaming of homework and soccer games and a normal life that was evaporating by the second. "One night," she said finally. "Then we're done." Elias nodded once. "Pack light. Marco will carry the girl." As Renee moved to wake Lila, she heard the faint crinkle of paper. A folded note lay on the floor just inside the door, white against the faded wood. She must have missed it when Marco knocked. She picked it up with numb fingers, unfolded it. Block letters, black ink. "He can't save you twice." Her hands started shaking again. This time, they didn't stop. The safe house was nothing like Renee expected. She'd imagined something industrial. Concrete walls, barred windows, the aesthetic of a very expensive prison. Instead, the car pulled up to a brownstone in a quiet neighborhood she didn't recognize, tree-lined and lit by antique street lamps that cast warm pools on the sidewalk. The house itself was 3 stories of red brick and ivy, with wrought iron fencing and window boxes that probably held flowers in spring. It looked like a home. Inside, the illusion persisted for exactly 30 seconds. Then Renee noticed the cameras tucked into crown molding, the reinforced door frames, the way every window had security film that caught the light at odd angles. Tasteful, expensive, locked down. "Second floor," Marco said, leading them up a staircase with a runner so plush Renee's worn sneakers left no sound. 2 bedrooms, shared bath. Kitchen access is fine, but the phone only makes internal calls. Boss's orders. Lila was awake now, groggy and confused, clutching her backpack like a life raft. "Mom, where are we?" "Somewhere safe, baby." Renee hoped it was true. Just for tonight. The bedroom was perfect in a way that made her uncomfortable. Clean white linens, blackout curtains, a bookshelf stocked with novels she'd never have time to read. The adjoining room for Lila had a twin bed with a stuffed bear already perched on the pillow, as if someone had known a child was coming. After Marco left, Renee sat on the edge of Lila's bed, smoothing her daughter's braids with hands that still trembled slightly. "I'm going to get us out of here by the weekend," Renee whispered. "I promise." Layla looked up at her with those two old eyes. "Is it because of the explosion?" "Yeah, baby, but it's going to be okay." "The man downstairs, Mr. Vasaro, he's the one you saved, right?" Renee nodded. "He seems sad," Lila said simply, and rolled over to face the wall. Dinner happened an hour later, after Renee had showered with hotel-sized bottles of expensive shampoo and changed into clean clothes someone had left folded on the bed, her size exactly, which was either thoughtful or deeply unsettling. The dining room was smaller than she expected, intimate even, with a table set for 3. Elias was already there, jacket removed, sleeves rolled to his elbows. The casualness looked wrong on him, like a photograph slightly out of focus. "Your daughter?" he asked as Renee entered. "Asleep. It's been a long night." He nodded, gestured to a chair. The meal was simple: roasted chicken, vegetables, bread that was still warm. Someone had cooked this recently, in this house. Not takeout, not catered. The domesticity of it made her chest tight. They ate in silence for a few minutes. Then Elias set down his fork, his gaze direct but not aggressive. "How old is she?" "Lila, 7. "Her school?" "Westfield Elementary. She's in 2nd grade." Renee paused. "Why?" "I'm calculating risk," he said simply. "Daily routines, exposure points, ways to keep her safe if this escalates." "It won't escalate." The words sounded hollow even to her. "You said one night." "I said we'd reassess." His fingers found his cufflinks again. "Right one, then left. That same compulsive adjustment. The prowler in your stairwell wasn't random. He had your apartment number written on his palm. Someone gave him specific instructions." Renee's appetite vanished. She pushed her plate away. "So what do you want from us?" "Nothing." He said it so quietly she almost missed it. "You don't owe me anything. I owe you." Before she could respond, the door creaked. Layla stood in the doorway, the stuffed bear tucked under one arm, her eyes puffy with interrupted sleep. "I heard voices," she said uncertainly. Elias stood immediately, the motion fluid and non-threatening. "I'm sorry we woke you. Are you hungry?" Layla shook her head, but her gaze caught on the bookshelf in the corner. 2 children's books, sitting on top of the adult fiction, spines bright and new. "Those are for you," Elias said. "If you'd like them." Lila looked at her mother for permission. Renee nodded, too surprised to speak. Her daughter crossed to the shelf, picked up the books, The Wild Robot and Matilda, and held them like treasures. "Thank you, Mr. Vasaro." "Elias," he said. Something in his expression had softened, just slightly, the sharp edges blurred. "You can call me Elias." Lila tilted her head, studying him with that unnerving directness children sometimes had. "Do you ever get scared, Elias?" The question hung in the air. Renee held her breath. Elias crouched down, bringing himself to Lila's eye level. His voice, when he spoke, was careful. "Honest. Only when I can't predict a move." "Like chess?" "Exactly like chess." Lila considered this, nodded gravely, and padded back to her room with the books clutched to her chest. When she was gone, Renee found her voice. "You didn't have to do that. I wanted to." He straightened, rolled his sleeves back down with precise motions. Children shouldn't pay for adult mistakes. There was weight beneath the words. History, maybe, or pain. Renee didn't push. The office on the 3rd floor was soundproofed and windowless, lit by a single desk lamp that cast long shadows across maps and ledgers. Elias stood at the desk, rolling up his left sleeve fully now, exposing the scar that ran from wrist to mid-forearm. Thin, white, 12 years old. He'd gotten it digging through wreckage, searching for his sister's body after the car bomb. The glass had cut through his jacket, his skin, down to tendon. He'd barely felt it. The pain had come later, in sterile hospital rooms where his father refused to visit, where guilt metastasized into something harder and colder. No innocence. The rule had been Elena's eulogy, and he'd kept it sacred. Until tonight, it had never been tested like this. By a woman who'd risked everything for a stranger. By a 7-year-old who asked if he got scared. His phone buzzed. Marco's voice, clipped and professional. "Boss, Haidong Group is denying everything. Diplomatic channels, lawyers, the whole performance." But I've got chatter from the docks. Local hire. Not their usual crew. Who? Still tracking. But the Koreans were subcontracted. Someone local wanted it to look foreign. Elias's jaw tightened. Options? Standard play would be to send a message. Public. Permanent. No. The word came out sharper than intended. Non-lethal intel. Trace the money, the contracts, the leaks. I want names, not bodies. A pause. Boss. That's not how we. It's how we do it now. Elias ended the call. He stared at the scar on his wrist, flexed his fingers. Renee Jackson's influence was already tilting him, rewriting equations he'd calculated in blood for over a decade. It should have worried him. Instead, it felt like the first clean breath he'd taken in years. The next morning, Renee woke to the sound of male voices. Low, mocking, drifting up from the first floor. She moved to the landing, staying out of sight. Softened him, one guard was saying. Did you see how he talked to the kid? Next, he'll be reading bedtime stories. The bomb wasn't even meant for him. A different voice, younger, sneering. You heard Marco. It was a warning shot. They wanted to scare him, not kill him. But now he's got civilians in the house, acting like... Like what? Marco's voice, cold as a knife. Silence. Get back to your posts. Now. Footsteps scattered. Renee stayed frozen, her pulse hammering in her ears. The bomb wasn't meant for him. The words rewrote everything. Renee caught the younger guard, the sneering one. In the kitchen, an hour later. He was making coffee, casual and unaware, until she stepped into the doorway and closed it behind her. What did you mean? Her voice was low, controlled. When you said the bomb wasn't meant for him, the guard's eyes widened. I didn't. You shouldn't have. Tell me. He shifted, glanced at the closed door like it might save him. Look, lady, you don't want to get involved in. I'm already involved. She took a step closer. Tell me what you meant, or I'll ask Elias himself, loudly, in front of everyone. The threat worked. His shoulders sagged. The Koreans were hired to scare him. That's it. A device big enough to total the car, timed for after he'd gotten clear. A message, not a hit. He swallowed. But then you screamed. You embarrassed his men in public, made them look weak, so the orders changed. The floor tilted beneath her. Changed how? They want you now, to prove he bleeds, to prove he cares about something other than territory and profit. The guard's voice dropped. You're the target, Miss Jackson. You and the kid. He's just collateral. Renee's vision tunneled. She heard herself say thank you from very far away. Heard her footsteps carry her up the stairs, down the hall, to the third-floor office, where Elias sat behind a desk with maps spread like battle plans. She didn't knock, just shoved the door open hard enough to make it bang against the wall. You caged us and painted a target. Her voice shook with rage, fear, something wilder. You brought us here and turned us into bait. Elias stood slowly, his expression unreadable. Renee, don't. She advanced on him, hands clenched. Don't Renee me. That bomb wasn't meant for you. It was a warning. But I interfered, so now they want me. Us. And you didn't tell me. I was protecting you. You were protecting yourself. The words tore out of her. Keeping us close so you could control the damage. So you could. If they touch you, I burn the city. The sentence stopped her. Not because it was loud. It wasn't. Because it was utterly, terrifyingly sincere. Elias's control had cracked. His hands were flat on the desk, knuckles white, and his eyes, God, his eyes, held something raw and desperate that made her breath catch. You think I brought you here for strategy? His voice was rough. For leverage? I brought you here because the alternative was leaving you in that apartment to die. Because I couldn't. He broke off, one hand moving to his left wrist, fingers tracing the scar through his sleeve, a tell she was learning to read. Couldn't what? Renee's anger was still there, but something else crowded in beside it. Something that felt dangerously like understanding. Couldn't let it happen again. The words came out flat, defeated. My sister, Elena. She was 12. Car bomb. 15 years ago. Meant for my father, but the timer was off. She was in the back seat when it detonated. His fingers pressed harder against the scar. I watched it happen. Watched her wave at me through the window 30 seconds before. He didn't finish. Didn't have to. Renee's fury collapsed into something more complicated. Elias. You want agency? He looked up, met her gaze. Fine. I'll give it to you. But understand this. I will not watch another innocent person burn because I made the wrong call. I won't survive it twice. The silence stretched between them, taut and electric. Renee saw him fully now. Not the controlled mobster or the cold strategist, but a man haunted by a child's scream and a lifetime of impossible choices. Then give me real protection, she said finally. Not locked doors and guards who think I'm a liability. Real tools, information, a voice in whatever comes next. Something shifted in his expression. You're asking to be involved. I'm asking to survive. There's a difference. He studied her for a long moment, then nodded once. 3 transport lanes shut down by tonight. Non-lethal pressure on the subcontractors until someone talks. We find out who hired the Koreans, and we end this without bodies. His gaze held hers. Your way. No blood. No blood. Renee exhaled shakily. It wasn't trust. Not yet. But it was something. Before either could speak again, Elias's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, and every trace of warmth drained from his face. What? Renee asked. He turned the phone toward her. A video still. 2 men kneeling in a concrete room, faces bruised and swollen. She recognized them. The Korean speakers from the rainy street, Jiho and Sungmin. Below the image, a text in English. Bring the woman to prove you bleed. Pier 7. Midnight. Come alone. Or we send her daughter's school the same message. A location. A time. A threat that made Renee's blood turn to ice. Elias's voice was quiet, lethal. I'm going. Not alone, Renee heard herself say. If they want me, they get me. But on our terms. His eyes snapped to hers, something like horror flashing across his face. Absolutely not. You said I get a voice. She stepped closer, heart hammering. So hear me. We do this together, or they'll just keep coming. I'm done being a target. Time to be a move they can't predict. For 3 seconds, Elias said nothing. Then his fingers found his cufflinks one more time, adjusting, steadying, preparing. One condition, he said. You do exactly what I tell you, when I tell you. No improvising. Renee thought of the rain, the explosion, the moment she'd chosen to run toward danger instead of away from it. Deal, she lied. The War Council convened at 11 p.m. in the safe house's basement. A room Elias had hoped Renee would never see. Concrete walls. A single steel table. Maps marked with routes and territories that represented years of careful negotiation and calculated violence. Marco stood at the head of the table, arms crossed, jaw set. We hit them now. Hard. Every known associate of the Haidong group in the city. Send a message so loud they hear it in Seoul. No. Elias didn't look up from the photograph on his phone. Jiho and Sungmin, bruised and kneeling. That's exactly what they want. Escalation. A war that draws attention, destabilizes roots, gives our competitors an opening. So we do nothing? Marco's voice rose slightly. They threatened the kid, boss. They sent a school as leverage. That crosses every line we have. I know. Elias's fingers found his cufflinks, adjusted them with controlled precision. Which is why we're going to the meet. Silence dropped like a stone. You can't be serious, Marco said finally. It's a trap. Obvious. Transparent. They want you dead or desperate. Either works for them. They want proof I'm compromised. Elias set down his phone, met Marco's gaze. That I care about something other than territory and profit. That the woman changed my rules. So we prove them wrong. No. Elias stood, the motion sharp enough to cut through Marco's objection. We prove them right. The room went still. Renee comes with me, Elias continued, his voice calm but unyielding. Not as bait, as credibility. She's the reason this started. She's the reason they believe I've shifted. If I show up alone, they'll assume I've already killed her to eliminate the weakness. If she's there, he paused, they might actually negotiate. Marco stared at him like he'd suggested walking into the ocean with stones in his pockets. You're risking everything on a civilian who doesn't understand our world. She understands more than you think, Elias's tone sharpened. And she's not a civilian anymore. She stopped being one the moment she saved my life. Boss. Final decision. Elias's voice went quiet, which meant the conversation was over. Prep for Pier 7. Midnight. 3-man shadow team on adjacent rooftops. Renee and I go in alone. Marco's jaw worked, but he nodded. The others filed out, leaving Elias alone with the maps and the weight of what he was about to ask. He found Renee in the library, curled in an armchair with a cup of tea gone cold. She looked up when he entered, eyes shadowed but alert. "Can't sleep either?" she asked. "I need to show you something." He held out a small device. Matte black, the size of a car key fob. Panic transponder. Press and hold for 3 seconds, and every man I have descends on your location. It has a 5-mile range. Renee took it carefully, turned it over in her hands. "You're really taking me to this meet?" "Yes." He sat across from her, elbows on his knees, close enough to see the faint tremor in her fingers. "But I need you to understand the rules. When we're inside, you stay on my left. Always my left. Never my right. That's Marco's side if things go wrong. Exits are north and east. The west wall backs onto water. If I say now, you run for the east door. Don't look back. Don't hesitate. And if you say something else, I won't." His gaze held hers. "The only word that matters is now. Everything else is negotiation." She nodded slowly. "What do I say if they ask me questions?" "The truth. Exactly what you heard that night. Nothing more, nothing less." He paused, something vulnerable flickering across his expression. "They'll test you, try to find inconsistencies, pressure points. But if you stay calm and precise, they'll believe you. And if they believe you, we have a chance." "A chance at what?" "Ending this without more bodies." His voice dropped. "Your way. No blood." Renee's hands steadied around the transponder. "I'm scared, Elias." "Good." He leaned forward, close enough that she could see the scar at his temple, the faint lines of exhaustion around his eyes. "Fear keeps you sharp. It's overconfidence that gets you killed." She met his gaze, something fierce and fragile in her expression. "Don't let me be the reason you die tonight. You won't be." He said it with absolute certainty. "You'll be the reason I survive." Pier 7 smelled like salt and rust and old fish. The warehouse squatted at the water's edge, windows dark except for the stuttering glow of fluorescent lights deep inside. Elias felt Renee tense beside him as they approached the rolling door, half open like a mouth waiting to swallow them. "Left side," he murmured. "Stay close." Inside, the space was cavernous and cold. Stacks of wooden crates formed narrow corridors, and the fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting everything in sickly green-white. At the center, a clear space had been made, and in it, a man sat in a metal chair like a king on a throne. Chairman Ryu was older than Elias expected, 60s maybe, with silver hair swept back and a face carved by decades of dangerous decisions. He wore a suit that probably cost more than the warehouse, and his hands, scarred knuckles, steady grip, rested on a black walking cane. "Mr. Vasaro." Ryu's English was precise, accented but clear. "You honor us with your presence." "Chairman Ryu." Elias stopped 10 feet away, Renee a half step behind him on his left. "You requested a meeting. I'm here." Ryu's gaze slid to Renee, lingered. "And you brought the woman." "How?" "Sentimental." "I brought proof," Elias corrected, "that your men acted without your knowledge, that this war was manufactured by someone who wanted us both weakened." Ryu's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. Interest, maybe, or calculation. "Bold claim. Do you have evidence?" "I have her." Elias gestured slightly to Renee. "The woman who heard your men that night, who can tell you exactly what they said, and what they were paid to do." Ryu leaned forward, cane tapping once against the concrete. "Then let her speak." Elias felt Renee's tension, the way her breath quickened. But when she stepped forward, just one step, not too far, her voice was steady. "Kei chehe tuso." The Korean words were still clumsy but clear. "That's what I heard. Bomb. Put it in the car." And then one of them said. She paused, closed her eyes like she was listening to a recording in her mind. "Hitsase, koya. It'll be fine by morning." Ryu went very still. "Those were my men's words?" "Yes." Renee opened her eyes. But they were talking about a device timed to go off after Mr. Vasaro had left the car, not during. It wasn't a hit. It was a scare. "And yet you warned him anyway." Ryu's voice was soft, dangerous. "Why?" "Because I didn't know the difference." Renee's chin lifted slightly. I just knew someone was going to die if I stayed quiet." Silence stretched. Then Ryu laughed. A dry, rasping sound. "Remarkable. You hired my men to send a message, Mr. Visaro. And this woman turned it into a declaration of war. I didn't hire your men." Elias's voice cut through the moment. "Someone local did. Someone who wanted us both bleeding. Names. I'm working on it." The first shot came from above. Glass exploded from a second-story window. The crate to Ryu's left splintered, wood and packing material erupting in a cloud. Elias's instincts screamed down, but Renee was already moving. Not away. Toward him. She slammed into his chest, arms wrapping around him in a desperate shield, and he felt the impact. Not a bullet, but her body weight driving them both sideways as the second shot punched through the space where his head had been. They hit the ground hard. Elias twisted mid-fall, covering her, his body between hers and the rooftop muzzle flashes that lit up the darkness like lightning. Rounds stitched across the concrete, sparking and whining, and somewhere close Ryu was shouting in Korean. Orders, curses, fury. East exit. Elias dragged Renee toward the narrow corridor between crates. "Move now. Move." But she was already running, her hand locked in his, pulling him with her into the darkness as the warehouse erupted into chaos. The corridor between crates was a maze. Left turn, right turn, stacks towering overhead that offered cover and claustrophobia in equal measure. Elias counted shots in his head, a rhythm he'd learned young and never forgotten. 6 rounds from the first shooter, 8 from the second. Bolt-action rifles, maybe. High-powered, meant to punch through walls and bodies without hesitation. 2 seconds, he said, breath sharp. "When I say move, you move. Don't think. Just go." Renee nodded, her hand still locked in his, slick with sweat or blood. He couldn't tell. Behind them, Marco's voice crackled through the earpiece Elias had tucked in before entering. "Boss, we've got your 6. Shooters on the north roof, taking fire." "Copy," Elias murmured. Then louder, to Renee. "Count with me. 1, 2, move." They broke from cover, sprinting across an open gap toward a steel support beam. A round cracked past Renee's shoulder. So close, Elias felt the displacement of air, and then they were behind the beam, pressed together, breathing hard. "You okay?" He scanned her for wounds, hands moving over her shoulders, her arms, checking for blood. "I'm fine. You?" "Fine." A lie. His side ached from where they'd hit the ground, and his left ear was ringing from the close shot. But functional. Alive. A new sound. Footsteps, heavy and fast. Ryu's men falling back, taking defensive positions. And then Marco's voice again. "Third shooter, east roof. He's got a bead on your exit." Elias's jaw tightened. The east door was their only clean route out, if it was covered. "Plan B," he said. "West wall. Water access." "You said west was a dead end." "It is. Unless you can swim." Renee's eyes widened, but she nodded. No argument, no panic. Just trust. They moved again, low and fast, using the crate stacks for cover. Behind them, gunfire intensified. Marco's team engaging the rooftop shooters, buying seconds that felt like hours. Elias's lungs burned, his side ached. But Renee kept pace, her smaller frame an advantage in the tight spaces, her movements sharp and efficient. The west wall loomed ahead, corrugated metal and rust, a service door that probably hadn't been opened in years. Elias hit it shoulder first, the lock giving way with a shriek of metal, and suddenly they were outside. Cold air, the smell of salt and oil, the black expanse of the harbor stretching out below a crumbling dock, and a masked figure, 20 feet away, rifle rising. Elias saw it happen in fractured time, the rifle's muzzle tracking toward Renee, her eyes widening, his body already moving, arm outstretched, shoving her down and back as the shot cracked through the space where she'd been standing. Pain, sharp and hot, lanced across his upper arm. Not deep, a graze, but enough to spin him sideways, off balance. And suddenly Renee was there, hands on his jacket, pulling him toward the dock's edge. "Jump!" she screamed. They went over together. The water was shockingly cold, a slap that drove the air from Elias's lungs. He kicked hard, pulling Renee with him, away from the dock and the masked shooter above. The current was strong here, pulling them south along the pier line, and for 30 seconds all Elias could focus on was keeping their heads above water and putting distance between them and the gunfire. Finally, they surfaced under a different pier. Older, sagging, the pilings encrusted with barnacles and seaweed. Elias hauled himself onto a barnacle-covered crossbeam, then reached down to pull Renee up beside him. They collapsed together, gasping, soaked through, and shaking. "Your arm," Renee said, voice hoarse. Her hands were already moving, pulling back his jacket sleeve. Blood welled from a shallow furrow across his bicep. Painful, but not critical. "It's fine." "It's not fine." She shrugged out of her own jacket, tore a strip from the hem of her shirt underneath, and wrapped it around his arm with practiced efficiency. Hospital training, he realized. Her hands were steady despite the trembling in her shoulders. "You threw yourself in front of me. You threw yourself in front of me first." He caught her wrist gently, stilling her movements. "In the warehouse. You could have run. Should have run. But I couldn't let them kill you." The words tumbled out, raw and unfiltered. "I couldn't just watch." Elias stared at her, hair plastered to her face, eyes wide and fierce, hands shaking as she tied off the makeshift bandage. She'd saved him twice now, once in the rain with a shout, once in a warehouse with her own body as a shield. No one had ever done that for him. No one had ever tried. "You saved me twice," he said quietly. Water dripped from his hair, his clothes, mixing with the blood on his arm. "From death. And from what I become when I'm alone." Renee's hand stilled. "What do you become?" "Someone who doesn't believe people like you exist." He reached up, brushed a strand of wet hair from her face with trembling fingers. "Someone who thinks courage and compassion are just weaknesses to exploit. Then stop pretending you're beyond saving." Her voice cracked on the last word. "Because you're not. You're not, Elias." The space between them dissolved. He didn't know who moved first. Didn't care. Their lips met in a kiss that tasted like salt water and desperation and something achingly tender. Not a reward. Not a transaction. A surrender. Renee's hands found his face, his jaw, the scar at his temple. His arms wrapped around her, pulling her closer. And for a handful of heartbeats the world narrowed to just this. Her warmth, her breath, the impossible softness of her touch against the hard edges he'd worn for so long. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Elias rested his forehead against hers. "We should." Footsteps above, fast and purposeful. Elias tensed, but then Marco's voice cut through the darkness. "Boss, you down there?" "Here." Elias helped Renee to her feet, keeping her steady as the adrenaline crash started to hit. "Status?" Marco appeared at the pier's edge, flanked by two others. His expression was grim. Shooters scattered. Ryu's men got one alive. "And boss," he paused, "the rival isn't Haedong." Ryu's men were subcontracted by someone local. "They're talking now." "Who?" "Victor Leone. He's pissed you didn't retaliate after the first bomb. Thinks you've gone soft. Wanted to prove it by forcing you into a war with the Koreans." Elias felt Renee's hand tighten in his. Victor Leone, a mid-tier capo who'd been pushing for expansion into Elias's roots for months. Ambitious, reckless. Exactly the kind of man who'd mistake restraint for weakness. "Where is he?" Elias asked. "We're tracking his locations now. Should have him by dawn." Elias nodded once, then looked at Renee, soaked and shivering and still standing. "Let's finish this." Dawn broke cold and gray over the city, painting the safe house's balcony in shades of silver and ash. Elias stood at the railing, a coffee mug warming his hands, watching the streets wake up below. His arm ached where Renee had bandaged it. The graze would heal clean, no permanent damage. A small price. Behind him, through the glass doors, he could hear Marco's voice on the phone, clipped, professional, coordinating the dismantling of Victor Leone's network. Not with bullets, with precision. Accounts frozen, routes seized, lieutenants flipped with offers of clemency in exchange for testimony. 3 port operations shut down overnight, their illegal manifests exposed to federal authorities who'd been bought off for years. A surgical strike that followed Renee's line. End the threat without creating more bodies. It was working, slowly, methodically, but working. His phone buzzed, a message from an unknown number. A single image. A white envelope on expensive, stationery, the Haedong Group's seal embossed in gold. Chairman Ryu's truce marker. Below it, a text. "Your woman was right. My men were used. The bomb maker has been found. Jiho and Seungmin have been convinced to talk. Consider our business concluded. Ryu. Elias deleted the message, but the weight lifted slightly from his chest. One threat neutralized, one war averted. Boss? Marco stepped onto the balcony, his expression unreadable. Leone's lieutenant just flipped. Gave us everything. Bank accounts, safe houses, the works. We can move on Leone himself within the hour. Coordinate with the feds, Elias said. Let them make the arrest. Public. By the book. I want Leone behind bars, not in the ground. Marco blinked. You sure? He tried to kill you. Twice. I'm sure. Elias met his gaze. Killing him makes him a martyr. Arresting him makes him a cautionary tale. And it keeps our hands clean. Marco studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Renee's influence. Yes. Elias didn't deny it. Couldn't. And it's working. After Marco left, Elias returned inside to find Lila sitting cross-legged on the living room floor, a chessboard spread out in front of her. The same board he'd left in the library 3 days ago. She looked up when he entered, her expression serious. I learned how the knight moves, she announced. It's tricky. It is, Elias agreed, crossing to sit across from her. His body protested, bruised ribs, aching muscles, exhaustion that went bone deep. But he ignored it. Show me. She demonstrated, her small fingers moving the pieces with careful deliberation. Mom says you got hurt last night. Are you okay? I'm fine. He paused. Your mother saved me. Again. Lila nodded, like this made perfect sense. She's good at that, saving people. She looked up, dark eyes solemn. Do you like her? Like her? Elias felt something crack open in his chest, not painful, but profound. Yes, he said honestly. I do. Good. Layla moved her knight. Because she likes you too, even though you're scary sometimes. I'm working on that. You should work faster. She grinned, sudden and bright. Checkmate in 4 moves, by the way. I practiced. Elias looked down at the board, reassessed, and realized she was right. He'd been so focused on defense, he'd missed her offense entirely. Well played, he said, meaning it. That evening, Elias found Renee on the balcony, wrapped in one of his jackets against the chill. The city sprawled below, lights beginning to flicker on as dusk settled. She didn't turn when he approached, but he saw her shoulders relax slightly. It's over, he said quietly. Victor Leone was arrested an hour ago. Federal charges, multiple counts. He'll spend the rest of his life in prison. Renee exhaled slowly. No bodies? No bodies. He moved to stand beside her, close enough to feel her warmth. 3 port operations shut down, 12 arrests, enough evidence to make prosecutors very happy. Your way. Our way, she corrected softly. Then, after a pause, what happens now? That depends. He turned to face her, the question he'd been avoiding finally breaking free. What do you want, Renee? Beyond survival, beyond safety. What do you actually want? She was quiet for a long time, her gaze fixed on the city. A life where my daughter isn't afraid of engines at night, she said finally. Where I don't have to choose between rent and groceries. Where, her voice caught, where I get to make choices, not just react to other people's violence. I can give you that. The words came easily, naturally. Protection, financial security, a real home for you and Lila. No strings, no obligations, just choices, not cages. Renee interrupted, turning to meet his gaze. If I stay in your world, Elias, it's as an equal. Not a kept woman, not a liability to protect. A partner. Something fierce and warm flooded through him. I wouldn't want it any other way. Her phone buzzed before she could respond. She pulled it out, frowned, then went very still. What? Elias asked, already moving closer. She turned the screen toward him. An image. Lila outside Westfield Elementary, red backpack, braids neat, talking to another student. Time-stamped 3 days ago, before they'd even gone to the warehouse. Below it, a text. Last chance. The world went cold and sharp. Elias took the phone carefully, screenshotted the message, sent it to Marco. When was this taken? Monday morning. Before. Renee's voice shook. Before any of this escalated. Which means someone's been watching her since the beginning. Elias's mind raced through possibilities, threats, angles of attack. Victor's people? Haedong group? Someone new? Does it matter? Renee's eyes were wide, terrified. They know where she goes to school. They have photos, Elias. What do we end it? He cupped her face gently, forcing her to meet his gaze. Tonight, permanently. But I need you to trust me one more time. Renee's breath hitched. Then she nodded. Always. The call came through at 9 p.m. Victor Leone was willing to talk. Not to the feds. To Elias. It's a trap, Marco said flatly, pacing the safe house's war room. He wants you close enough to take one last shot. Probably. Elias didn't look up from his phone, where he was coordinating with two women from his old neighborhood, Rosa and Maria, the ones who'd protected him when his father's empire had collapsed, who'd taught him that strength came in forms other than violence. Set it up anyway, the Paramount Theater, empty. Just him, his lawyer, and us, boss. I want Renee there. The room went silent. Even Marco, who'd learned to expect the unexpected, stared. She needs to see how this ends, Elias continued, voice calm but unyielding. She needs to know that choosing restraint doesn't mean choosing weakness. Renee stepped into the room then, Lila's hand in hers. Lila's going with Rosa and Maria, she said. You trust them? With my life. Elias crouched down to meet Lila's gaze. They're going to take you somewhere safe. Somewhere fun. Ice cream and movies and… I know, Lila interrupted, surprising them all. Mom explained. You're going to stop the bad people so we don't have to hide anymore. Exactly. Elias held out his hand, and after a moment, Lila shook it solemnly. Don't let my mom get hurt, she said, voice small but fierce. I won't. It was the easiest promise he'd ever made. The Paramount Theater was a ghost. Velvet seats coated in dust. A stage curtain that hadn't risen in years. Victor Leone sat in the front row, flanked by a nervous lawyer who kept checking his watch. Victor himself looked defiant, chin up, shoulders back, even with federal charges hanging over him. Vassaro, Victor's voice echoed in the empty space. Come to gloat? No. Elias walked down the center aisle, Renee a half step behind him, Marco and two others flanking. I came to show you something. He nodded to Marco, who produced a tablet and held it up. Financial records scrolled across the screen. Accounts, transactions, dates, Victor's illegal operations laid bare in black and white. This is what the feds have, Elias continued. 3 counts of racketeering, 2 counts of conspiracy to commit murder, wire fraud, money laundering. You're looking at 30 years minimum. Victor's defiance cracked slightly. So I'm offering you a choice. Elias stopped 5 feet away, hands loose at his sides. You can fight this. Tie it up in court for years. Bleed your resources dry. Watch your family suffer while you rot in prison. Or you cooperate. Give up your remaining lieutenants. Expose the corruption you've been feeding. And in exchange, I make sure your wife and kids are protected. Financially secure. Untouchable. Victor's eyes narrowed. Why would you do that? Because killing you accomplishes nothing, Elias said simply. But showing mercy? That rewrites the rules everyone thinks I play by. He felt Renee's gaze on him, steady and sure. This was her influence. The belief that power didn't have to be measured in bodies, that strength could look like restraint. Victor stared at him for a long moment. Then his shoulders sagged. I want the deal in writing. Done. Elias nodded to the lawyer, who scrambled for his briefcase. And Victor, if you ever threaten anyone in my circle again, if you even think about it, mercy ends. Understood? Understood. They left him there, small and defeated in the empty theater, and walked out into the night. The safe house felt different when they returned. Warmer, somehow. Less like a fortress and more like a home. Layla was already back, curled on the couch with Rosa, watching a movie and eating popcorn. She lit up when she saw Renee, launching herself across the room. Mom! Rosa taught me how to make empanadas. Did she? Renee caught her daughter, held her close, and Elias watched the tension finally drain from her frame. That's wonderful, baby. Dinner that night was simple. The empanadas Lila had helped make. A salad, bread still warm from the oven. They ate together at the kitchen table, the 4 of them. Elias, Renee, Lila, and Rosa, who refused to leave until she was sure everyone was actually okay. Lila laughed at something Rosa said, the sound bright and unguarded, and Elias felt something shift in his chest. This was what he'd been missing. Not power or territory or fear. Connection. Family. The kind that was chosen, not just inherited. Later, after Lila was asleep and Rosa had finally been convinced to go home, Elias found Renee on the balcony again. The night was clear, stars barely visible through the city's light pollution, but the air smelled clean. New. "It's really over?" Renee asked, not looking at him. "It's really over." He moved to stand beside her, their shoulders almost touching. "Victor will cooperate. The Haidong group has pulled back, the threats neutralized. So we can go home." She said it carefully, testing the words. "You can." Elias's throat tightened. "If that's what you want, I'll make sure you're protected. Guards, security system, whatever you need. You and Lila can go back to your life." Renee turned to face him, her expression unreadable in the dim light. "What if I don't want to go back?" His breath caught. "Renee, you said I get to choose," she interrupted. "That this is about agency, not captivity. So I'm choosing." She took his hand, her fingers warm and sure. "I'm choosing to stay. Not because I'm afraid, not because I need protection, but because," her voice softened, "because you were my warning, and now you're my north." Elias felt the words settle into him, rewriting something fundamental. "You warned the devil once, and now I walk beside the man," she finished. "But I have conditions. Name them." "Lila stays in her school. We get a real address, not a safe house. Sunlight and open windows and locks I control. I'm not a prisoner in your world, Elias. I'm a partner." "Done." He said it without hesitation, without calculation. "All of it. Whatever you need. And one more thing." She stepped closer, her free hand finding his face, thumb tracing the scar at his temple. "You let me help you rewrite what power looks like. One rule at a time. No more bodies unless there's no other choice. No more wars that can be solved with words. You're asking me to change everything I've built. I'm asking you to build something better." Her eyes held his, fierce and uncompromising. "With me." For a long moment, Elias just looked at her, this woman who'd run into danger to save a stranger, who'd shielded him with her own body, who'd refused to be caged even when fear demanded it. She'd rewritten his rules without even trying, and in doing so, she'd given him something he'd thought lost forever. Hope. "Then we build it together," he said, and kissed her. Slow, deep, inevitable. When they finally pulled apart, the city hummed below them, engines and voices and the pulse of life continuing in the dark. Renee leaned into him, her head on his shoulder, and he wrapped his arms around her. Every time engines hummed in the dark, she would remember the rain, the neon, the word bomb, whispered in Korean. The moment she chose to speak instead of stay silent, the moment that changed everything. She'd warned the devil once. Now she walked beside the man, rewriting what power looked like, one careful choice at a time. And for the first time in 15 years, Elias Vasaro believed in something more than survival. He believed in mercy, in second chances, in the woman who'd saved him twice, once from death and once from himself.